There you go.
There we go. Very good. Yeah, that's better, Nigel. Yeah, so we're going to work off a slideshow. But I'm glad you're all here. I really appreciate having an audience for the work that I've had for a long time. Hi, Andrea, and Karen and Naomi. Work I've been, teaching for over 32 years now, and it's sort of amazing how one gets called into service in a particular way at a particular time, and so I feel fortunate to have something to offer. This for everybody. All right. So there's anything anybody wanted to say before we get started into the actual forum? Anything at all?
Well, do you want us to mute our mics?
Yeah, I do want you to mute
Okay.
your mic, so there's no background noise. But so if you want to speak, you can unmute yourself or raise your hand, and I can unmute you or remind you to unmute. All right, so I'm Robert. I've been teaching, like I said, I've been teaching breathing for 32 years. My company is called the Breathable Body, and I teach the particular breathing method. I teach continuum movement. I'm a body worker, and I'm also a certified breathing behavior analyst from the Graduate School of Health Sciences in Wyoming. And so I'm going to share my screen here, so you can see the beginning of this. And there's Clover. Share, and I'm going to go to speaker view. Great. So can you all see this first slide here? The lungs. Everybody's good with that. Hi, Clover. Great. So my major concern here is how do we stay safe and care for ourselves, and how do we use breathing to do that? So the purpose of this presentation is to provide information on COVID-19, information that I've gathered over the week and months now, and how to use your breathing to keep your lungs strong, keep them flexible, resilient. If you do get sick, how to recover, how to bring health forward. And for me, it's not even so much about a technique, though I'll give you a lot of exercises to do today. There's going to be a fair amount of information. You will get the copy of all of these slides, so you can take notes if you want to, but you will have a copy of all of these slides, and you'll have a copy of the video as well. Right? Okay. So I'm not a doctor, I'm an educator. I'm a breathing educator and a movement educator. So that's the information that I am disseminating today. So I wanted to talk a little bit about susceptibility. What are the things that we're starting to see as susceptibility? My number one piece about susceptibility, and there are many articles written about it currently, is that 91% of the world's population doesn't have clean air to breathe. So what does it mean not to breathe clean air? It means that your lungs are compromised because they can't get what they need. So we are mostly all compromised, except right now, I'm looking at Penny's background there, a nice clean blue sky back there. We're seeing a lot of clean air in a lot of places that didn't have clean air for a really long time, right? And what I wanted to say about that was, so the things that I've been reading lately is one of the reasons that it struck older people first was you could speak to the fact that we are weaker, or our immune systems are possibly weaker as we get older. But one of the number one things that has weakened our immune system is 60 or 70 years of breathing polluted air. We've had polluted air for that long. So we have been breathing that air for the longest amount of time. Of course, now we're seeing other reasons for people to be compromised. The one on there here is obesity has come up this week in the news because they're finding that there's a 50% higher death rate with people who are coming in with the virus who have obesity issues. And the reason for that is really very simple. It's about the fact that the weight in the stomach inhibits the movement of the diaphragm. And so there's less ability to breathe. With that less ability to breathe, the system is compromised because it can't really work the lungs the way they need to be worked. So the lungs are compromised. Mouth breathing makes one more susceptible because it dysregulates breathing and puts you into anxiety and fight or flight. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Plus, it delivers all the pollutants directly into your mouth. You don't give your nose a chance to filter any of that information. High blood pressure also can be a result of a dysregulated breathing. Diabetes as well, but these are all susceptibilities, and people who die tend to have these cofactors: coronary disease, pulmonary compromise. And surprisingly, there was a nice article this week about why are we not seeing more people with asthma in the hospital. You would think that would be the number one people would come in with asthma, and they're not seeing that at all. And they don't know why, but they are seeing people with severe asthma. So if I take a look at it from my learning, and that's why I asked you, Laura, about if you're on medication, people generally who are maybe mild or moderate asthma, like yourself, Laura, are medicated. So your asthma is under control at this particular time. Severe asthmatics, usually medication, they even have a hard time struggling even if they're on medication. So they are compromised more so than somebody who's just moderately has asthma or mild asthma and is stabilized through their medications or through breathing techniques. Particularly does the same thing in most cases. And now we're seeing more people die of kidney disease, a huge amount of kidney disease. And I just want to speak to this really quickly because so I saw this and I thought, well, let me think about it from my perspective. Why are people dying from kidney disease? Well, the two systems in the body that regulate the blood pH, the acid-base balance in the blood, which has to be balanced for health and for the delivery of oxygen safely to the cells, are our breathing and our kidneys. They're the only two that help regulate the pH of the blood. So when we are in respiratory failure or having respiratory difficulties, and that cannot regulate the blood, and the blood is being dysregulated by our breathing, then the kidneys have to take over. And so they're going to be working extra hard right now. And if the virus is traveling through the bloodstream, more blood is going to the kidneys than anywhere else to keep that blood balanced. So the virus is showing up in the kidneys. So that's my feeling about it. It's still a respiratory disorder, even though it's going to the kidneys. All of these things are influenced by the primary thing that we do to keep alive, which is to breathe. Anxiety, stress, fear, and panic, they're ongoing debilitations to our immune system. Our immune system, when we're in stress and anxiety and panic, is overreactive. It starts to clear out healthy tissue as well as tissue that's foreign to the body. And when it does that, when it's overreactive and clearing out all kinds of tissue, that when it means to clear it out, it means to create debris, to break down tissue and create debris. So that extra debris that it's trying to get to in the lungs from when it's anxiety and fear is causing more debris in the lungs. So the lungs are getting more clogged up. So, and a weakened immune system that just may be happening for other reasons. So all possible outcomes can dysregulate the breathing, and dysregulated breathing can produce those kinds of outcomes. So we are talking about that today in dysregulated breathing. So anytime you have a question about any of that, please raise your hand up. So all of those, dysregulated breathing reduces breathing capacity. It reduces the lung space, like I said, with too much weight in the belly going up, limited diaphragm movement, chest breathing. And now they're not sure, though people are having pneumonia, but they're maybe also having HAPE, which is high altitude pulmonary edema. So rather than what they originally thought was pneumonia, could be just edema, which means that the blood vessels are constricting when they should be widening to deliver the oxygen, and that constriction then pushes blood out of the airways, out of the bloodstream, and then that blood gets into the lungs and clogs the lungs. So they're not even sure what they're even looking at this particular time. So important to note that. So breathing and breath is a whole body communication stimulating health. So the more our breathing is open and be able to communicate, and that's what we're going to look at here today, the better our health is going to sustain. So here are my attitudes towards breathing, and I want you all to embody all of these attitudes. That breathing is a sacred gift. It deserves honor, caring, tenderness, and grace. Without it, we will not survive. And we don't need to force it. We don't need to make it work, and we don't need to make it do it at once. We just have to give it the room to allow it to do what it needs to do in our body and set our body up for the receptivity of breath in a healthy way. So for me, it's an ally. It's what keeps me healthy, keeps me awake, keeps me aware. And when I need some help, I go right to my breathing to support whatever I want to see arising or shifting in some way if I feel stuck. We'll talk more about that too. And it's pleasurable. It can be pleasurable. Maybe not when you have COVID, but we try to even find a way. I worked with a woman yesterday who had COVID, and I gave her some breathing techniques that she felt like, oh my goodness, I can breathe. And she wasn't able to up until that moment. It doesn't mean us any harm, even though what's in the air can mean us harm. The breath itself is not something that means us harm. It is a behavior. We have habits of how we use our breath. And so learning about those habits can help us change our habits to maybe something that feels more productive. And breathing supports self-regulation of all body functions. And when it's not right, body functions don't regulate properly. So I said this earlier, 91% of the world's population does not have clean air to breathe, as far as we know. Because a lot of people, like with COVID, are showing up dead because they never even went to the hospital, so the numbers are changing. 9 million people a year die from air pollution, and those are the people who come into the hospital. That's a lot of people. That's a pandemic, right? Hey, Carol. So 18% of those, so here's the thing about for asthma, 18% only die from respiratory compromise. And half of those are from lung disease, like asthma and COPD and emphysema. The other half of that is from lung cancer that the air pollution can deal with, bring to us. 72% of the people die from heart compromise. So it affects the heart greater than it affects the lungs, which is a surprise to most. So take that figure in, 9 million people a year. So people like in India right now who are reporting to seeing the Himalayas, beautiful picture of the Himalayas there. For the first time in 30 years, they are able to actually see those mountains. That's an outstanding shift in our air quality. So we talked about this at the beginning, and supportive posture helps to reduce airway resistance. So this is a new term on the science. This word proning means pronation. Pronation is when you are lying on your stomach as opposed to supination when you're lying on your back. So what they're discovering, and we've been talking about this here for a couple of weeks now, that back is, no back for sleeping, no back sleeping, or resting for recovery. So let me get this in mind. Let me get these two sentences right. So I want to tell you this story. So a man came in to the hospital, and I think it was in New York. Blood saturation is the percentage of oxygen that is carried in your blood. Healthy oxygen percentage in the blood saturation is 95 to 97, 98%. This man came in with 40 saturation. I mean, how he was still alive with only 40% of the oxygen in his blood was a miracle in itself. So that would be normally on a ventilator immediately. And the doctor took him, put him on his stomach, and in 1 minute, his saturation level was back to 95. So that being on the back compresses the back of the lungs where there is more lung tissue than there is in the front. And there's more deeper down at the bottom of the lungs where gravity takes hold to pull the air in. And in Chinese medicine, kidneys pull the air in. So the doctors are talking about when they get them in the hospital and put them on their stomach, they want to recruit more of their lung to breathe for them in areas where the virus is not located, which is mostly in the front of the lung tissue. So that's why they're getting them on their sides, and they have a protocol now, which I've included here. I'm not going to go through it, but it includes 30 minutes on and 30 minutes off and back and forth. So you'll get this in the slides, and it's really easily available on the internet. But they're basically saying keeping people on the stomach between 4 and 8 hours a day, if they can. So this is called, in Breathable world, this is called the horse rider position. And so what we see is this young child here on the edge of her chair, where she doesn't really have her thighs on the seat, that she's sitting on her sit bones, those two bones that are in your pelvis, and she has her feet flat on the floor, and in Breathable we say a little bit more than shoulder width apart. And so like you were riding a horse, your legs would be a little wider than your shoulders if you had a horse underneath you. So this is a real balanced position if you can find neutral there, which lets the body rest down on the support that you're sitting on. And when you are receiving support from the earth and from what you're sitting on, the body has a chance to relax. It likes to be supported, and it opens up easier for breathing when it feels supported. In addition to that, this position here, this is one round bottom, and 2 little feet. And the vertebrae are exactly the same way. They have a round disc between them and a body of the vertebrae, and each vertebrae on the sides has 2 little feet that connect to the 2 feet below it. So when we sit in that position, we're aligning our vertebrae and our vertebral column, which also supports an easy opening of the lungs while we're breathing, because we have the support of the spine. If you must lie on your back, then you want to lie in this position where your knees are up. So you don't have to hold them like this. You could actually put them a pillow under there, and you can have them actually straight out at 90 degrees or keep them at this angle, but have a pillow. Why? This is another thing that doctors are now beginning to speak about, which is we've known for a long time, is that when you put your legs straight down, all of the viscera, the liver, the stomach, the intestine, the reproductive organs, they all move towards your diaphragm. And so they limit that movement of the diaphragm opening to pull the air open to allow the lungs to have more air. When you put your knees up like that, then you get back that 40, because all of that content of below the diaphragm is moving towards the pelvis and getting out of the way of the pelvis. So just be aware of that. It still doesn't deal with the fact that you're on your back and you're limiting the opening of the breath in the back. But if you have to be on your back, then at least do that much for yourself. Okay. So this is another very important piece right now that's getting more notoriety. Is in a wonderful book called Jaws, that if you want to read more about the tongue and the mouth. But the tongue needs to be at the roof of the mouth, and the lips and the teeth are slightly touching if possible. And this completes the respiratory circuit and the whole energetic of the body of the torso. So I'm going to show you another picture here. This is a picture where the tongue, the pink piece here, is right up against the hard palate. You see it here. The hard palate is the roof of the mouth and the floor of the nose, one same structure. And so when we look at this, I'm drawing your attention to this space here. And we can see here probably 1/4 to 1/2 inch of width in the airway space here. When the tongue this is the upper palate here, and this is the tongue here. When the tongue is lower than the palate and at the bottom of the teeth, then look at the airway space here. It narrows the airway space. So when you're on your back, for most people of any age past probably teens or 20s, your jaws are going to fall back and your tongue's going to fall back, which is going to narrow the airways also when you're on your back. So better to be on your side. So I'm going to invite you here just for a moment to do that, to just notice your breathing with your tongue at the roof of the mouth, just so you have a firsthand experience of this. And just, if you can, track the movement of air, if you can be sensitive to feeling the flow of air and the way it flows through the throat. And then let your tongue come to the bottom of your teeth, and maybe even let your teeth separate more. And just feel that airway space. You may notice a narrowing of the air through there. You may notice that it doesn't quite flow as easily, or you may notice that you're needing to put more effort into breathing to get the air through there. And then take it back up to the roof of your mouth and see the difference. So, anybody want to say anything? Or, Laura, you got something to say there?
Yeah, I can really feel a difference. Like, wow, just such a simple move makes a big difference.
Mm-hmm. Great. And Kathy, for you?
Well, I have a weird bite, and I also have sleep apnea.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually feel like I breathe better when my tongue is down. Now, that just might be an illusion. But it's good to see this diagram. It helps me visualize.
Yeah, and it's hard to distinguish. It'd be worth practicing to see it. Usually people, children who learn this technique of keeping their tongue up there, reduce their chances of orthodontia, reduce their chances of their face getting distorted from using their tongue out at the bottom of the mouth. It narrows the face, which I can see, Kathy, is a little bit,
Yeah,
narrows your
I
face.
have terrible bite. I'm a tongue thruster, and I had orthodontia when I was 14 that failed. I don't want to bore everybody with the details.
No, it's true. But in that
Yeah.
book, Jaws, she talks about that terrible bite and the malocclusion from breathing and having the tongue in the wrong place as another pandemic, which is setting up so many issues of sleep apnea later in life for people.
Right.
Is the narrowing. So it could be that you feel more comfortable because you're used to it. So I would invite you just to play with it a little bit. And the recommendation is to try to spend at least 8 hours with your tongue up there so your body gets used to doing it that way. Yeah.
I just want to comment. I work as an oral facial myofunction.
Hey, great, Lori.
Yeah. So, that you say, tell her to put it up there. If you do that, a lot of times you might be engaging muscles that shouldn't be activated. So there's intrinsic and extrinsic muscles of the tongue. So if that's not your resting posture, a lot of times for you to do the movement to let it rest into the palate, you'll be using the extrinsics, which shouldn't be engaged. So my recommendation, actually, if that is not your normal resting posture, is actually work with someone who can actually retrain you to be in that place. Because there could be fascial or muscle tension. There could be a restricted tongue. And I always say, from my perspective, because I'm going to be doing research on this, but it's one thing when there's a restriction where the tether comes really close to the tip, but there can be one that's farther back. And maybe more about, a lot of times it can be the fascia and the muscle that's stopping you from being able to lift it up enough. And that's where you have to really work with a good experienced myofunctional therapist to help you with that. And so and I've had people do this going, well, I'm trying to keep my tongue up, but then they're straining all these muscles through,
Right.
just creating all these other issues. So I'd be really careful of doing that.
That's exactly what it feels like. It feels like I'm straining. I don't want to detour Robert's presentation here, but Lori, maybe Robert could put you and me in contact, because I've heard of myo whatever, but I don't know what about it.
Oral facial myofunctional therapy. Yeah. No, I think it's really important. It's even about the whole aspect of light touching that comes from the muse. And it's usually actually probably what feels more comfortable is about 1 millimeter apart, 2 millimeters apart, 3 millimeters, some of that range. A lot of this will relate. There's so many other things that could be dysfunctional that, you're going to bring yourself to the least compensation, or compensation, should I say, instead of being a lot of compensation. So just something to put into
I'll
place.
contact you later. I don't want to detour the presentation,
Sure,
but thank
sure.
you.
That's all right. I really appreciate the caveat about, getting some outside help for that. I mean, I worked with it myself and with also some other myofascial functional teachers. So I have some experience in it. And you can also be tongue-tied because you have the frenulum is too short as well. So thanks, Lori, for adding that in. Appreciate it. All right, so we're going to do a little bit. So one of the things that's really, so one of the ways that they're counting whether people are getting good respiratory engagement is how fast they're breathing. So when people are breathing 20, 30 times per minute, they're really way out of the range of being able to regulate their system with that much breath per minute. So that they're using that count along with blood saturation level to talk about whether people are ill or not, because they're having shortness of breath and they're having to breathe a whole lot more. So for respiratory health, it is better if we keep our breath rate down to about 12 breaths per minute. And from a yoga perspective, yoga feels like it's 4 to 6 breaths per minute. And coherent breathing, which is very popular now in terms of really helping people regulate their breathing and their heart rhythms in sync with each other, is about 4.5 to 7 breaths per minute. So this is an exploration that I have found to be the simplest one to help slow your breathing down, is to follow the biological function of movement. Movement is a biological function, is an essential nutrient that we receive from breathing. Breathing moves our body. So just for the next 3 minutes, the instructions are to engage with the relationship between the movement of air and the movement of body. How do those two things reflect in each other when you move breath in and out? How does your body respond in movement? And as your body responds in movement, what happens with your breathing? So there's no right or wrong. People often get really caught when you ask them to do some breathing pieces about whether they're breathing right or wrong, and they get really caught up in their thinking about it, and that really inhibits the breath. It causes too much stress. So here we are just talking about the movement, right? And the question you could ask yourself is, how do I receive my own breathing while you're doing that, right? So you're all willing to do this for 3 minutes? And if you're not, just sit quietly, and we'll be back in 3 minutes, okay? And you can close your eyes if you'd like, or keep them open, whichever is more comfortable for you. Do what feels comfortable for you. Just paying attention to movement. It can also help open your airways. If you look, even with your eyes closed, just about 10 degrees above the horizon. So it lifts your chin so you don't compress your throat. And any movement that wants to follow in your body, any rocking or movement, just let it go there. Breath provides movement. And that rocking can become comforting. All right, bringing yourself back when you're ready. Okay. Did that produce the desired effect, slowing your breathing down, maybe calming your energy a little bit? Just nod your head or speak if you want. Great. All right. All right, so nose breathing is essential here.
Can I ask you a question, Robert?
Yeah, who's
You talked
talking?
about looking up 10 degrees. I know that when I took the Proteka course that I took, that you basically looked up but not necessarily lifted your head up. Are you asking to lift your head up a little bit? I mean, that doesn't make sense.
No, I'm not. I'm asking you to keep your head straight, but there was a couple of people had their head down, and by looking 10 degrees above, the head came up a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Into neutral.
Okay. Yeah, I thought it was always neutral with your eyes looking a little bit gazed higher. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, it just helps bring them up. All right, nose breathing is essential. It's important to breathe through your mouth as often as you eat through your nose. It's sort of a silly little thing to speak to, but it's worth remembering it that way. It's hopefully implants it in your memory. And you pace your activity level so that you can use your nose for breathing during that activity level. So if you start to move faster, then your nose can keep up with your breathing. And it's not about opening your mouth or breathing harder. It's about slowing your activity level until you're more in line with your capabilities. And essentially, it's most essential when you're outside now or in a grocery store, even if you're inside a mask. And though it's harder to breathe inside a mask, as most of you must know by now. So these are two.
I have a question about that, Robert. This is Carol.
Sure, Carol.
I have a real hard time breathing under a mask, and I'm in them all the time now. And I was wondering if you had any ideas.
I don't. I mean, I wear them outside in the grocery store. I have an N95, a couple of N95s that I have, and I also have some homemade masks, and they're just hot. And with the season coming up, with the heating up, it's going to even be harder. And you have to really be conscious of your breathing and slow it down. You're not getting as much air in as quickly. So the effort of breathing in has to be lighter, more gentle, trying to pull the air in. So the inhale may last a little longer to get as much as you may need in there. But if you go against the resistance and try to battle the resistance by breathing with more force, you're going to wear yourself out and strain the heart. So it's about slowing the breathing down, being conscious of. So lots of times I think it's been people have been amazed by that. It's like when if I ask you where the air is that you breathe, a lot of times people, well, it's out here, you know. Well, no, it's right here. It's right under your nose. So if you're conscious of that, that's where the air is. Then you're in touch with the flow and the quality and the density of the air, and you can sort of regulate the flow of that to match what's actually there for you and the temperature that's there for you. So working with what you've got, right? It's a food. So it's like you're working with the food of air and how you actually digest it or take it in, if you will. I hope that helps, Carol. That's what I do. It is, again, about consciousness and conscious of the air and consciousness of the process. So this is an Olympic gold medalist on the left after running a quarter mile, 440 yards. She has practiced Buteyko for many, many years, along with other modalities of Pilates and body conscious things. And she just picked up that gold medal for her relay team. And you want to be her, don't you? Just nice and quiet, easy, breathing with her mouth closed, really connected to her capacities of breath and how much it can feed the movement and not go beyond and over, like the young woman on the right. I don't want to be her. She's really using her will to get through, not her innate body intelligence like the woman on the left. And then there's the swimmer on the right who's nose breathing while he swims, which is a very difficult thing to do, but has mastered the art of relaxation while swimming. So the nose and the major benefits. These two images here are, this is from Alexander Tessaris. I show this one because I want you to actually see the inside of a nose. So you see these are the bones beyond the vestibule of the nose, and they create this spiraling movement of breath. So breath comes in as a spiral. And that's how when I see people move, people are rocking back and forth. You're just following the spiraling that the breath is producing for you. And so being in line with movement in the spiral, everybody's happy. So the nose is the guardian of the lungs. That's my term. And the reason is because I have a list at the end of these slides, which we won't go through, of 28 reasons that 28 values of nose breathing that you can't get from mouth breathing. So one of them is filtering. It filters 0.5 microns and above. Human hair is 50 microns. Most of the pollutants, 2.5 in the air that are calculated for when the air is polluted, are above 5 microns. And so we have an opportunity to really filter most of the pollutants out, even though it does clog up our nasal passages. Unfortunately, smoke and viruses are smaller, as are microplastics. The filaments of microplastics are getting under, nanomicroplastic sizes are getting under 5 microns. It regulates the temperature of the air because the blood is the regulator, and there's a lot of blood vessels in the nose, and so it helps to either bring heat to the air or remove heat from the air. It regulates the humidity through the mucous membranes, and it produces antibacterial molecules, and it regulates gas exchange and nitric oxide production, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. So it's very important in producing the molecules of nitric oxide, especially, which are anti-inflammatory and have been known to be antiviral. So we'll talk about that. So none of this happens when you breathe through your mouth. None of it. So you breathe through your mouth as often as you eat through your nose, unless you want really bad things to happen. So it gives the body a chance to innovate a response by presenting the invader to the defenses before it enters the lungs. If it can do that, if we have a strong enough immune system, it's at least a warning system coming in that's letting them know that something foreign is there. Gets right into the lungs, you're already in that very compromised place already. So, mouth breathing tends to activate the fight and flight response, and nose breathing tends to settle the nervous system and allow more rest and settle for most people. So we can try that. So you just want to try that right now. You want to mark a couple of things. You want to be nose breathing in a good position right now. And just want to mark a few things. You want to mark the effort of breathing. And you can put a hand on a chest and a hand below your belly if you'd like, and see which hand moves first. And you want to, as effort and state of your nervous system as you nose breathe. And then open your mouth, take a few breaths, and watch what happens there. You want to see what the effort feels like. You want to see which hand begins to move first, and you want to see what happens to your nervous system. And you can go back and forth until you register that. So most people report breath moves to the chest when you mouth breathe, which is a smaller space. It sets up a level of activation of the nervous system. Some interpret that as anxiety, some interpret it as a mobilization of energy. But a constant breathing up here from the mouth breathing will trigger, a constant feeling of being activated all the time, and there's no rest in the system, and that's not a healthy thing for the immune system. Any comments on that? So I'm just trying to reinforce this nose breathing piece. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a huge, huge difference. I mean, from your belly, it's a lot more calming. You can get more air, because then you can bring it up to your diaphragm, then into your lungs, and it's a big bonus all the way around versus that. And I do catch myself breathing out of my mouth a lot. So I really need to pay attention to that. That probably helped my asthma right there.
Yeah, we'll cover that in a minute too, but breathing's a habit, and it's a habit you have, so.
Yeah. So
yeah, and this is a really important issue, because I'm sure when people are coming in who are being sick, they're terrified to be in the hospital. They're they're panting, they can't breathe in their chest at all. And so the fear level's got to be really high. And so what they're trying to get them to do is that thing that I mentioned at the beginning about recruitment. They want those lungs in the back to be getting open, because up in the top, they can't get what they need. They need the gravity feed at the bottom of the lungs to open up so they can get more blood flow and more oxygenation to the body. Up at the top, it's a limited amount of oxygenation that you can receive. So thanks, Laura.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, please.
I notice every time it happens, I start yawning.
Right.
Like, is that because I need more oxygen, or because I've got too much, or it happens every time?
None of those.
Okay.
So thanks, Andrea.
It like creates a response, like a reflex almost?
Absolutely, absolutely. So here's the issue right here. So over the supply of oxygen, of the oxygen supply of the body, carbon dioxide spreads its protective wings. So without reading too much of the slide, let me just tell you this, that our body has the same atmosphere internally as it has in the atmosphere outside: oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon dioxide. When we know from global warming that it's not balanced out there, we see weather disturbances. When it's not balanced internally, we see internal weather disturbances. Carbon dioxide is a byproduct of respiration that we use in our body to help the distribution of oxygen. So carbon dioxide is essential as a vaso and bronchial dilator. It opens the airways and opens the blood vessels, and it balances the pH of the blood, which emphasizes, that's not the word, facilitates, thank you, facilitates the flow of oxygen out of the hemoglobin in the red blood cells to all the other cells in the body, which then use the oxygen to make the energy molecule that runs our entire body. So besides the nourishment of movement, it is the nourishment that cells need primarily to make energy. And the way that that gets distributed most efficiently is when the carbon dioxide levels in the body are maximized. So it's not a waste gas. We don't have to get it out of our body. The body will let the right amount out when we nose breathe through our exhale. 2/3 of the load of carbon dioxide that leaves our body through our exhale stays in our sinuses, and we breathe it back in. So we know this. I'm going to answer your question, Andrea, in a minute. We know this from folklore of somebody hyperventilating, about to faint, and they come up and give them a paper bag, and then their fainting goes away. Well, that carbon dioxide, when they're hyperventilating, is going out in such a great degree that the blood flow with the oxygen to the brain diminishes to the point where the brain's going to faint. They breathe back in the paper bag, they're breathing their own carbon dioxide, the oxygen gets released, and the brain comes back online. So what happens for people, Andrea, some people are low in levels of carbon dioxide from breathing habits. They're giving off too much generally in their breathing, especially in mouth breathing. So the brain stem, and some baroreceptors and chemoreceptors in the carotid bodies and the cerebral spinal fluid are monitoring carbon dioxide all the time. So when we're used to giving out too much carbon dioxide, the body resets the respiratory mechanism to be comfortable with the lower levels, but it does speed up the breathing. So when I ask you to close your mouth and breathe through your nose and quiet your breathing, your carbon dioxide levels are rising. They're rising above what your body is used to. So it makes a yawn to get rid of it, to bring it back into the range that it's used to. So the training is to inhibit that yawn, close your mouth, keep your fingers over your mouth, and try not to open your mouth, to reset that level so it gets used to more carbon dioxide, which will open up more flow of oxygen. I hope you got that. Yeah, good. Everybody else get that?
How is that more affected by smokers?
Well,
Obvious reasons, like
yeah.
I'm talking about the levels of carbon dioxide.
It's a lot of, unless you're blowing out smoke through your nose, there's a lot of mouth breathing through smoking. You're blowing out a lot of smoke all the time. There's a slide coming up. I don't know if it's the next one or not. Yeah, for every breath out through your mouth of 1% decrease in the flow in the balance of carbon dioxide in your body, you get a 2% decrease in the flow of oxygen. 3 big breaths out of your body. People say take a big breath and blow it out. You do 3 of those, you decrease your distribution by 14%. So it may feel good in the muscles to do that, for relax for a moment, but unless you close your mouth and breathe back through your nose and bring back that carbon dioxide, you've just decreased the flow of oxygen by 14%. And usually the weakest part of the body is the one that suffers the first. So not so bad in 1 or 2 times, but if you do that chronically, take a big breath and are blowing it out all the time, you think you're getting a bit more relaxation, doing a lot of damage to the equilibrium of your blood gases in your body. Okay, so I'm trying to practice this. I actually am speaking pretty quickly today, but one of the ways to not give off too much, to engender too much fight or flight when you're speaking, is to make sure that when you finish a sentence, you take the time to breathe back through your nose, quietly breathe back through your nose. So I'm pacing myself, so when I run out of air to speak, I take a breath back in, I go to the movement, I go immediately to the movement, not to grab a breath, but I go immediately to feeling, the movement of my own breath and body. So it brings me back to being connected to myself so that I can be connected to myself and be connected to you at the same time. So it takes a while to practice this, but it's a really good habit to get into. And reading a book aloud is one way to do that, because there are periods and commas, and periods and commas are places to take a breath pause. So every new breath that arises after I breathe in and every new speaking is starting from new. Okay? So here's the lungs. So everybody gets a good picture of the lungs. I find that people are often interested in this. So the arms are up here, which is also a good thing to do when you're breathing and trying to catch more air. I saw somebody doing that. I think Karen, it was you. And so the lungs are above the clavicles. Even though this arm is up, they're up here. They're up here, right almost at the neck. And this is the front here, and this is the heart space. There are 3 lobes here, 2 lobes here, and this is the front, and this is the back. And here's a picture of it from the back. And this blue area here is where the lungs can expand into when you take a fuller breath. And this is the space that the doctors are trying to get people to breathe into when they are coming into the hospital to get more recruitment of lungs in their body, lung space in their body. Right? So you can see if you're lying on your back, you're going to compress that space. But when they put them on the stomach, that space can open up and they can breathe back there. All right, so here's an exercise that I want to turn over to you in terms of letting your body breathe you. So let's let the body intelligence begin to bring inhale and exhale into your body. And I show this picture again because each one of these openings, the lower opening, the middle opening, and the other opening, relates to a different part of your brain. So just quickly, alternate nostril breathing from yoga is about tuning the electricity in each side of the brain. So when you breathe through your right nostril, this part of your brain is getting tuned electrically. And the left one, this one. So alternate nostril breathing is about bringing them both online simultaneously for a sense of coherence. The human body, changes which nostril is dominant every 20 to 90 minutes. And so we are automatically switching to help our brain come online. And so when we're breathing through here, we're more left-brained, and when we're breathing through here, we're more right-brained, right? Okay. Also, the bottom hole tunes your instinctual response, your stomach, your gut muscles, your gut breathing, your diaphragmatic breathing. The middle one is your limbic system, your more emotional brain and your heart. And the upper one is your thinking brain and your cognitive function and your bliss point. So I'm asking you to do this little exercise here just to get a sense of it. And this is something you want to begin to practice until you get good at being able to do this without thinking. So I'm changing for you how you bring, some of you, how you may bring air into your body. So most people, when they breathe and think about breathing air into the body, they actually create an energy of taking a breath in, right? I'm pulling breath in. So I'm going to ask you to do this to see if you can get your lungs to pull the air in so lungs can breathe you instead of you breathing your lungs, which will be a much different experience. So when we think something, we hear it in our head, right? We hear enough. That's the loudest noise we can hear is the one we're thinking, right? So all I'm asking you to do is to think the syllable sa when you breathe in, and think the syllable ha when you breathe out. And then watch what happens to how air comes through your nose. You can also play back and forth when you take a willful breath, I call it. When you breathe in, what happens to the tension in your chest? Does it open or does it get tight when you take a breath in? And when you do sa, what happens in the chest muscles? In the side ribs, in the back ribs. And so again, you're following movement, but it's changing the kind of movement that's happening. All right. I'd like to hear from a couple of you. Kara. Hold on, we'll unmute you, Kara. Hold on. Or can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, I just, I wanted to make sure I understood that correctly.
Please.
Because I think I'm used to a lot of Jayu breathing and yoga and making sure I'm using the diaphragm, but were we trying to think in our mind that we're using the lung more? Because I do think this is, I don't know if I was doing it right.
No, it's a good question. I appreciate the question. No, it's more that using the lung more, trying to make more air in the lung would be more about, making the ribs open. This is more of an awareness of what's happening inside the lungs, how they're expanding. We're feeling into the expansion of the lungs inside the rib basket.
Okay.
And also you can put your hand here and here again, and notice when you do that, you're still opening the diaphragm.
Okay.
But I'm trying to bring you into much more of an internal experience, as well as allowing that internal experience to be what guides your breathing, which is your lungs are, we're not trying to manipulate the breath, we're trying to allow the breath to happen. So as we reduce the airway resistance through the nose by saying sa and ha, the lungs can breathe in as much as they need, and then when they feel satisfied, they relax, and then we breathe ha, we wait for the end of the exhale, and we're looking for that reflex that says, time for the next breath, and we're reducing, like I said, airway resistance in the nose. Because if you breathe in harder through your nose, you'll notice your nose will contract. It'll come closer, so that's also limiting airspace. Yeah,
thank you,
Kathy.
I'm just very interested. I do a lot of meditation where you are consciously directing your breathing, and what I think I'm hearing you say is you want to move away from that. So shall I start the mental sound of sa or ha after I feel my body doing the inhale or the exhale? Because what I found myself doing was triggering the inhale or the exhale with the syllable. And I think you're thinking about the reverse, which is really tricky if you're used to directing traffic.
Right, it is tricky. And so when you are waiting for that impulse, as soon as that impulse arises, you go into ha, sa, and ha, right? But even if you're not, let's say you are wanting to manipulate the breath for a particular reason. I mean, yoga has 3,000 different kinds of breaths that they use to manipulate the tissue. So I'm talking about here about how to learn back to allow the only manipulation I'm offering here is to switch back to letting the lungs do the job.
Right. And my normal breathing when I'm relaxed has a period of rest before I inhale.
That's right.
It settles. So not to be but just to let the lungs inhale when they're ready and start the sa again.
That's right. That's right. And that I hope you can feel that that you receive the air in a much more relaxed way.
Yes. Yeah, I felt that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yes, I can feel my lungs expanding sideways more instead of like an up and down. I don't know, there's more room to let air in. it's such a big difference for me. It's like, wow.
Yeah, that's what happens. And you can, if you need to, let's say you're in a place where you are being told to bring more air in to expand your lungs. Let's say you did get not well, you're in the doctor, you say, okay, well, I'm gonna extend my thinking of Sa and open up bigger. So the thing that I think is marvelous about it is if I try to do it the other way and make my breathing bigger by doing this, I get tighter here. And then I come up with the slogan, I can't take a deep breath, right?
Yep.
But this way, what I'm doing is if I elongate the Sa, which means over a longer period of time and slower, the breath comes in more gently, which means less volume all at once, which means I can extend that inhale to let that gentler volume fill up the spaces until it feels like it's filled up. And I'll know, my lungs will know, that's all we got. And then the exhale will start. So it's a gentler approach to breathing. And what happens over time when practiced is you don't need to think Sa and Ha anymore. You automatically know, let my lungs do the breathing.
Yeah, I can feel the difference right away. It's amazing. It's like,
it is. And then again, if you're tuning to this, you could breathe in and just shorten your inhale and just feel whether there's a continuity through you, or you can lengthen that inhale until you feel like it fills up all the way through here and feel the unity of the organism when breath has touched these three parts of your brain: the cognitive, the heart, not the brain, the limbic system, and the instinctual part.
Yeah. Wow, that's fascinating.
So it brings more unity. And we know that, here's another example of what happens when somebody gets angry and they're about to go right into, I'm a lizard, I'm gonna eat my young. What do their noses look like when they do that?
Flared.
Yeah, and where are they going? They're going right to that bottom hole to activate that brainstem to go, I'm all on instinct now.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah, so the nose is, my favorite part of the body.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else? Okay. So here's a nose clearing exercise. I'm going to do this for you, and we'll do it together in case your nose does get stuffed. So this is, basically what we're doing is we're breathing in when our head comes back, breathing out, just getting used to this rocking motion. At the end of the second one, this is the breathe in, breathe out. You grab, pinch your nose, clean hands, wash your hands, and you bob your head 6 to 10 times or less if you have a heart problem. Keep your mouth closed and breathe extremely gently, maybe with Sa, when you let go of your nose. And you repeat that as often as you need to until your nose gets cleared. Or if your neck is compromised, you can just move your feet or get up and walk around back and forth. Do this, not do this. If you're going to do it back and forth, just breathe in, breathe out, hold your nose, and walk until you feel a slight urge to breathe. So if you end up breathing like this, when you're done, you've held way too long. The breathing is meant to be really gentle, like you were smelling a rose. But I prefer just to breathe in when I let go with Sa and let it just open up. So anytime you start to feel sick, Clover. Unmute, Clover.
Hi, Robert.
So I noticed that I generally, I more frequently feel my nose get stuffed up when I lie down, go to sleep at night, but I've been fine and even cleared my nose while I've been awake and walking around. So do you do the same rocking motion while you're lying down?
You can, but I'm going to give you another exercise to do for going for nasal clearing before you go to bed or while you're lying down. Are you on your back, Clover?
Not necessarily. It's often on a side, and sometimes one side will be worse than the other.
And do you mouth breathe at all?
well, when I can't breathe through my nose, then I will end up going to my mouth.
For sure.
Gotta breathe.
Okay. Kathy?
I don't understand if you're breathing through your nose, you're pinching your nose at the same time you're breathing.
No, you take a breath in, you take a breath in, out, then hold your breath, don't breathe, bob, then inhale.
Okay, so thank you.
Yeah, great.
Robert,
You can all try it. Lori, yeah?
yeah, you know, I've taken Buteyko, right? So I'm always learning. I've seen some instructors where they do talk about, you know, having a strong urge to breathe, but you're talking about not taking it that far. So I find that interesting. Can you elaborate why?
Yeah, as soon as you have a strong impulse to breathe, you're going to breathe a force that's going to close your nose right back up again. The guardian of the lung does not like a lot of force. It's going to inhibit force into the lungs. And so there's no point in doing that. I have found that when my nose is stuffed, let's lose this way, what's it serving? It's serving me to reduce the flow of air into my nose, that I have been breathing too fast through my mouth probably, and too fast. And so that when I begin to slow my breath down, and I did this when I first did Buteyko, and it was an amazing experience, I thought, well, you know, there's got to be an opening somewhere. And so I slowed my breathing down, I slowed it down, I made the flow, I often call it, I found a ribbon of air that I could fit through an opening that I didn't know was there, but I kept making it smaller to find the opening through all the mucus and the fluid that was in my nose. And I found the stream of air that went right through that opening. And as soon as that happened, the whole nose opened up. It said, now you got the message. You slowed your breath down just the way you wanted it to. And the whole epithelial lining sucked out all the mucus out of my nose. And so doing it this way is about increasing the level of carbon dioxide, so it helps vasodilate. And then you don't want to force anything. You just want to allow the air to come in really gently. That's my take on it. It's always worked for me. I wouldn't want to go to the forcing, holding.
Yeah, it makes sense to sort of stay in harmony with optimizing the body's functions. So that makes sense.
Yeah, great. All right, so so this is a study that was done for nighttime stuffiness. One of the things for nighttime stuffiness was humming for 20 minutes before going to bed. Actually, the study reports that the person hummed for an hour before they get to bed. And it produces nitric oxide. Nitric oxide production by humming increases it from anywhere from 7 to 15%. And so in this particular study that they did, the man did an hour for the first day, and the next night, he had very little nighttime stuffing. He did it for 4 days, never had another problem with I don't know, never had another problem, but it totally cleared up his nighttime stuffiness. So right now, it's really a good exercise to do, to just hum for 20 minutes at a time, maybe 3 times a day. All right, I'm gonna skip us doing it together, but you want to practice that, because until they show it concretely, if you will, through studies, it is a vasodilator. It is an anti-inflammatory. Your body produces it. Somebody got a Nobel Prize for its discovery. It increases oxygen distribution by vasodilation, and it did in SARS in 2006 have an antiviral effect on the virus. We don't know if it's going to happen this time. I'm sure there'll be studies done. Hey, if it worked once, why not have it work again? So, you know, if you want to keep yourself healthy, or you feel like you may be getting sick, hum. Okay. All right, here's a stop cough exercise. This is for somebody who talked to me about having a cough beforehand. I'm sure it probably will not work for COVID, but because that cough is unrelenting, I heard. But you know, you want to put your hand over your mouth so you don't, you know, maybe you can inhibit the cough, unless it has to be a really good clearing cough, and then of course you can open your mouth. Swallow. Take small breaths in and out through your nose. Try to hold the breath at the end of the exhale. Tell yourself you're not going to cough, and try to return to nose breathing. So you get these instructions. Kathy?
I'm wondering, when I cough, it feels like I need to cough. There's like postnasal drip in the back of my throat, and if I don't get it out, I'm not going to breathe smoothly. It does then become a cycle that's, not productive. But how do you know when it's a productive cough and when it's
Well,
not?
the thing to do is to try to clear that way, and, with your mouth closed. And because the harder you clear, the more damage you can do to your vocal cords as well.
Yeah, I've had a lot. I'm a singer, and that's been a huge problem is
Right.
postnasal drip, and then I get laryngitis, can't sing at all.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah. So on the first lecture that we did here, the first seminar, somebody recommended a product called Ponaris, Ponaris, P-O-N-A-R-I-S. It was used by the astronauts to clear up their stuffy noses when they were in space. What can I tell you? I don't know. That was just an advice from somebody who came online. So Kathy, you'll know if it's, if it's a lot of phlegm and it's stuck and it's like you want to spit it out, you got to open your mouth. But if you could just want to move it, because you want to move it, maybe you'll swallow it back down and the stomach will take care of what it is. But, it'd be interesting to see if you would take care of some of these, use some of these breathing things that I'm suggesting. You may find that
Right. And it
because
only,
usually mouth breathing produces more mucus.
yeah, it only happens at night, and I don't wear a CPAP for my sleep apnea, so that coughing and throat clearing wakes me up. So it would be nice to.
Are you on your back?
I sleep on my back and my side. I don't think I could sleep on my stomach. It hurts my neck too much to put it.
For sure, that's true with a lot of people, but don't sleep on your back at all. The increase of, I can't give you a statistic about it, but it's always, and all the people that I've worked with have come with sleep apnea, and they show me their results on the back.
You're on your side, you don't have any APIs. Yeah, right. I know. Right.
So, and the downside of having sleep apnea, if it's serious, is it can damage your heart.
Yeah, so far so good, but
Good. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, just don't want to worry about you. All right, this is also for Clover and everybody else. This is another thing to do, a particular exercise called the mini pause. So one of the things that you mentioned, which is really true, Kathy, is that when you're used to coughing a lot, all your energy comes up here. And when you're sick, you tend to have sneezing, you're coughing, you're sighing, you're yawning. All your energies move to your chest. It becomes the habit. You go back to chest breathing, and that's going to really, the recovery is going to last longer when you're sick if you're chest breathing. So this is exercises for a few things. One is to reduce nighttime nasal congestion, and the other is to do after coughing, sneezing, yawning, and sighing. So it's a real simple. You breathe in, breathe out, hold for 3 to 5 seconds, and start your breathing again. I always find it returns me to my diaphragm. So the other thing that when I learned Pateco in the early 2000s is if you're feeling ill, if you feel like you're getting sick, and somebody in one of the other seminars says she's been doing it for 15 years since I taught it to her and never got sick, is to do 100 of them in an hour. And to do three times a day if you're feeling sick. 2 ways of doing this. One is you can get toothpicks out or any other thing, have 100 of them on one side of the table and move them every time you do one, move them over. Or I do them once every 3 breaths. And in an hour, I get 100 in. I don't like counting.
Now, Robert, when you do it after I yawn, I've always done it where I've yawned, and then at the end of a yawn, I just do the pause right there, and not, and then, yeah.
Okay. So what are you basically doing? If you yawn with your mouth open or you're sneezing, you cough, you've given off some carbon dioxide, right? So here you are holding your breath for 3 to 5 seconds. Carol, do a mini pause. If you're holding your breath for 3 to 5 seconds, you're regaining that CO2. You're keeping that in your body so that you're not dysregulating your gases. It's really simple. And it helps self-regulate the breathing. Okay, great exercise to do, especially if you think you're getting sick. So this, you mentioned this earlier. Somebody said about the habit of mouth breathing. I think it was you, Laura. This is a great way to do this. Just make a list. 10 reasons, 10 times I use, 10 things I noticed or less when I use my mouth for breathing. If you're going to change a habit, you got to know you're doing the habit, right? So if you notice it, usually people hear it. Oh my God, that was a big mouth breath. Yeah, great. So 2 places besides taking a shower, eating, talking, drinking water, watching television, driving a car, getting ready to go on vacation. Those are all things where people start to mouth breathe and engender panic and asthma. I did it every time I went to the mailbox. Go figure. Mailbox was something that I couldn't control, so it made me nervous. What's going to arrive in the mailbox? So once I started noticing that, I go, okay, I'm going to the mailbox. Became a much more pleasant experience.
I notice just randomly, so I'll pay attention more. Or like when I'm going for a walk, sometimes I think, oh, I need to take a bigger breath of air.
No, you're going to pace yourself so now you can breathe through your nose while you're walking.
Yeah, so I will work on that one.
Yeah, and you know, not to dishearten anybody, you will get in shape in a different way. I've had all the runners I've worked with, within 3 days, they're all nose breathing.
Wow. Okay. That to get off too far, just sitting here listening to you, I've been putting my tongue on the roof of my mouth.
Yep.
And I'm noticing behind my lower teeth, the muscles, you know, are working differently. So I'm assuming if I keep doing that, eventually, you know, everything will shift a little bit, so it won't feel, you know, like, oh, this is straining something else somewhere.
So Laurie,
Those muscles shouldn't be working if your tongue's up in the roof of your mouth.
they should not be working.
No.
Yeah, I've used my continuum practice to bring this whole part of my body in relationship to here, so that it just rests there now.
Okay.
And the thing that I heard once, and I don't know, is it Laurie or Laura Lee? Laura Lee.
It's Laura.
Laura. Oh, it's Laura.
No, I'm Laree.
Laree.
Yeah.
Laree. Double E. Laree. When I first heard it from a therapist, she said just to say the syllable ack, and so I can ack, A-C-K, and so I feel the back of my tongue up against my teeth. I can't get them in between my back teeth, but I can.
Yeah, so with good therapy, you'll actually be able to get it from resting between your teeth, like you're talking about. It kind of spills over in between, right? So, yeah. That's what you get. Like those are the subtleties that, or the values that when you're working with a good therapist, they'll actually develop the tongue to actually rest that whole area. A lot of times we talk about how narrow the palate can be, but I've had people who've been quite narrow, and actually be able to attain that. But there can be the aspect of someone's really short, and anterior posterior can really make a restriction. So, like for example, myself, but you can't get it to the palate.
Okay, good.
It needs to be assessed, of course.
Yeah. Kara, unmute yourself. Oh, sorry, Laura, were you not finished?
Yeah, would it work better to rest my tongue like right behind my upper teeth instead of straight up at my palate? Then I wouldn't feel that straining in the lower part of my mouth behind my bottom teeth.
You go like this.
Hold on, I have to see.
Are you trying to reach up? It's just the tip. You're trying to like if you're going in the middle of, I mean, it's a lot of semantics here, but it's, you know, your tongue should really be, you know, resting. Sorry, I've got models and everything here. Resting in the palate, like it should be fully into the palate. A lot of people are like this naturally, or they're down. But getting the whole palate, whole tongue up is a whole different game. And the thing is, it shouldn't be something consciously done. It should be also just like breathing. And that's why breathing is kind of intricate. You know, just like with breathing, you do exercises and you know, neurologically retrain the brain how to breathe. When we do myofunctional therapy, it's actually neuroplasticity that's taking place. You start to change those templates. So those are the new templates.
And so here's the picture, Laura, of how the tongue is resting in this curled position here.
Okay, so yeah, I don't need to bring
that's where you know, if you want to go to embryology, that was his home. The palate was separated and the tongue was in between, and the palate came together and the tongue dropped back. So it's the tongue's home.
Okay. Yeah, that makes more sense. Okay, thank you.
All right, and Kara, you wanted to say something?
I just wanted to make sure I was understanding that nose breathing, like when you're exercising, I know how to breathe in my nose, but am I actually blowing out through my nose?
No, exhales are passive.
Okay, so the exhale is passive, but it's just that you're kind of aware of it, but you're making sure that you're actually breathing through your nose first when you inhale. That's the most important. Okay. I just wanted to make sure I was understanding that.
Inhale and exhale through your nose.
Yeah, okay, okay, got it.
All right, let's do this little short meditation here. We're just going to include sa and ha, and we're going to include the idea of rest, of letting the body rest on support. We all like to be supported. When we find a friend who wants to support us in our life's path, we always feel a little more intimate with them. So we want to get a little more intimate with ourselves and a little bit more intimate with gravity here. So on every exhale, this may answer some of your question, Kara, on every exhale, we're losing air. So the pressure in our body is changing. So we're not as light or as buoyant when we have all that other air in our body from our inhale. So the weight of our body feels different. It's not like we lose weight, but the weight of our body feels different. And it's a downward movement towards gravity. And so we are engaging with gravity in our chairs and with our feet in that posture. So when we exhale, how do we allow ourselves to soften or allow the body to soften when it receives support? Or we feel like, yeah, I'm letting myself really rest on that support. What above that support also says, well, now that there's support underneath me, I can sort of let go, or sort of relax would be a better way of saying it, or soften. And if something does change, if there's some incremental softening of the body in an upper area, you want to notice what that next inhale feels like. Is there more room for the inhale? Is the inhale easier? Do I open for the inhale with less effort? Am I being a little more receptive as I feel supported? And my inhale brings me into a little more consciousness of space. And these are two forces of gravity, the downward pull and the upward lift. So the inhale is the upward lift and the exhale is the downward pull. So you can spend a lifetime at this one meditation because everything is resting on something else in the body. So there'll be always there can be little new pieces of information about, oh, I can rest my shoulders on my lungs, or I can let my calves rest on my ankles, or my ankles on the bottom of my feet. And the real key to elaborating this exploration is whatever I'm noticing, to keep it in awareness when I inhale. And breath will go there. Breath will follow awareness. So this is for me, this is a really important piece of knowing how to rest in my body. And if I'm leaning up against something in the back, that's another place that I'm being supported. So I can soften into the support, learning how to receive support. It's a cumulative process and one you can come back to over and over, because I do. You getting the idea of this? Anybody had a comment? So I know we're going through some of these quickly, but these are ones that I'm hoping to give you that you come back to. We've touched a few, and then we come back to them later and do them later.
Yeah, it's really relaxing. I can so feel my body relax into the earth, even though I'm on the second story. I can totally feel it. That's great.
Great, Carol. And does it make you, and when you relax, do you feel like the inhale is easier? Great. We're going to give our bodies the best chance. It's easy when we're frightful. Like a cat gets really frightful. What's the first move it makes? Up into the air, right? We don't want to stay up there. Okay, So this was just my conversation about breathing with and not into. I really have an objection to the idea that we're supposed to breathe into something as a way of fixing it. But when something shows up, whether it's something in our heart and our emotions, in our body and our mind, and it's present in our reality, just breathe with it. Breathing is movement, and that helps whatever is in our field to move. All right, so I say, when I teach Breathable to clients, to practice at least 60 minutes a day with one of these pieces that I've given you, so that you begin to build in a new habit and build in a new awareness, and breath becomes your teacher. It's like, oh, look what I'm getting, look what's being informed. Look how I'm being informed. And you can ask your body, your breath, to say, what do you want me to teach? What do you want me to learn today? And just listen for any answer. It's a teacher. I'm a guide, it's a teacher. So just think about breathing with. And there's this note about taping at mouth. Some of you have seen this from Breathable, about using paper tape. And this is a 1/2 inch. You can get it in 3/4 and an inch. So you take a piece of paper tape and you bend over a piece that's not sticky. So you have a place you can get off to it. Wash your hands and take some of the sticky off. And then you can wear it one of 3 ways. Keep your mouth closed at night, or this way, or 2 pieces, or, which is the preferable way, if you find it in your hair in the morning, you took it off. You don't even know when you took it off, but you took it off. If it frightens you, if the idea feels like this is really odd, try it when you're washing the dishes. Try it when you're watching television. Try it when you're reading a book. But if you're a mouth breather and your mouth is really wet and dry in the morning, you're breathing with fight or flight all night long. So taping is really, eventually you should get used to the idea of keeping your mouth closed while you're sleeping. In the Breathable teaching, they say about 6 months of mouth taping. I'm a slow learner because I've been doing it since 2003, so I'm still working on it. But mostly I can keep my mouth closed at night, but towards the morning I notice it gets open. All right. So here's some things that happen with extended periods of anxiety. You got an overactive immune response, which you mentioned earlier. Too much carbon dioxide released, which means less oxygen flow, which means a decrease in energy production, lots of fatigue. Digestion turns off because it's not an essential. Non-essentials are turned off when you're in fear. Digestion is one of them. So poor digestion happens. Heart rate will be fast and pounding most of the time. You probably will be pale when you're frightened and fearful. Blood leaves the surface of the skin, which is a reservoir to go to inside the body to protect it from damage. Cold hands and feet, tunnel vision, increased sweating, and obsessive thoughts. Obsessive thoughts can be from a lack of oxygen. It's kind of a message the brain is sending up. It's like, we're in trouble here, pay attention. So here's an exercise I found really interesting. I've tried it a couple of mornings. I heard it on, I don't know, I heard it on a YouTube, or I heard it on I read about it. It's a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 exercise because present moment reality is a sensual experience. In other words, we're in our senses. When we're in our senses, we're in the present moment of our experience, because that's the primary experience humans have, is being in their senses. So why not tune into the senses? So I was walking on the beach. I thought, I'll try this. 5 things I want to look at the beach. Okay, mountains, water, light, 4 different sounds, birds. Oh, some of this slide got cut off, sorry. 4 different sounds, 3 different ways that I can touch, maybe pick up a stone or feel my breath in my body, 2 smells, and 1 taste. And so, put my tongue in my mouth, what does my mouth taste like? And think, whoa, I'm in my senses right now. So that was just a nice way to kind of calm myself down, and a real simple way to do. So I thought I'd pass it along. Very simple, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So here's an exercise for, there's 2 more here. Hyperventilation exercise. This is another Breathable practice. This is one you use for anxiety, for asthma. So if you're caught with that on an inhaler and you're really in trouble, you can do this one for asthma. If you're just anxious, helps you bring you back to your belly breathing, and also helps build the CO2 levels that you might have given away from being anxious and calm the breathing down. So I put this one in. I have a number of them, but this one is the easiest one for people to do. And it is also one that if you see somebody who's anxious, or you see somebody who's having an asthma attack and doesn't know what to do with them, you can guide them through this because it's on seconds. 2 in, 3 out, and then hold. Hold for 2, 2 in, breath out, hold for 3, breath in, breath out, hold for 4, 5, 6, come back, always come back, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Or if you're having an asthma attack, I'm an asthmatic, I haven't had to use this, see if you can go to 7, to 8, to 9, to 10. It will be a struggle and you'll be frightened, but on the way down, your airways will open from all that extra CO2. So let me take you through this. It's 81 seconds. It may be too fast because you're all breathing nice and quietly now, but let's just do this one for 81 seconds, okay? So I'll tell you to breathe in, I'll tell you to breathe out, I'll tell you to hold or suspend, and then I'll tell you to breathe in. Okay. Ready? Take a breath in, breath out, suspend. 1, 2, breath in, breath out, suspend. 1, 2, 3. Breath in, breath out, suspend. 1, 2, 3, 4. Breath in, breath out, suspend. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breath in, breath out, suspend. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Breath in, breath out, suspend. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breath in, breath out, suspend. 1, 2, 3, 4. Breath in, breath out, suspend. 1, 2, 3. Breath in, breath out, suspend. 1, 2. Breath in, breath out. Great. So that hopefully will relax everybody a little bit even more, or it may have felt too fast for some of you. If it does feel too fast, you can extend the exhale to 5 or 6 and then hold. But remember, you're doing this because you really can't catch your breath. You're out of breath. You ran up a flight of stairs. You've been exercising too hard. Something frightened you. You can't get back to your breath. Real simple to do. Brings you right back to your breathing.
I got a question, Robert. When I've done this before, at least when I was trained in it, they sort of said to repeat each stage twice.
It's a different exercise, Lori.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
And I don't teach that one here because it gets a little more complicated for people to follow that.
Okay.
So this one is an easier one to follow. Okay. Now, again, I brought this one back. This is not from my teaching, but something that I've learned from a choir director named Carl Stow, who is no longer dead. He was choir director for Carnegie Hall in New York City. Would teach untrained people how to breathe. He would teach them how to breathe, and he would also teach them how to sing afterwards once they knew how to breathe. He wouldn't teach anybody who didn't know how to breathe how to sing unless they knew how to breathe. And so he did a lot of work with the U.S. Navy on helping people with emphysema strengthen their bodies after they had emphysema. And he was a firm believer of strengthening the diaphragm, that the diaphragm was a muscle, which it is. And with emphysema patients, he saw a lot of holes in the muscles. And so he did a lot of this work along with massage to soften the body so that it had an easier opportunity to breathe. But this was a really simple way that he used for helping people strengthen their diaphragms. And it goes like this. Take a breath in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, see. So what you're doing is you're making your body work beyond its regular exhale to make that diaphragm push up against the lungs to make it work. And so there's no standard, but you want to practice that and then see how far you can go. So it's a really good one to be strengthening your diaphragm. I like to tell the story. I like to tell the story, but he was an influential man in the process of Obama becoming president. Because in 1968, he was invited by the US Olympic Committee to train the track team. So he trained the track team, and those black athletes who came in first and third, I believe. The Black Panthers who raised their hand, made a stand for Black power back then. And they got on that pulpit because of this breathing, and they credit their wins to this breathing process. So it is in the trajectory of our history in that regard. All right, a couple other remedies. Sea salt to treat a headache or cold when you're not feeling well. It's got to be sea salt, Himalayan salt probably, because the Atlantic is filled with microplastics, but so the Himalayas, so it doesn't really matter anymore. Quarter of a teaspoon, half a teaspoon in hot water 3 times a day as a tea. It's the minerals. When you're over breathing, you dissipate your minerals, so it brings back. It really works, surprisingly, but it does. You may want to wash your nose when you're been outside, as well as your hands, with a little salt and baking soda or neti pot. Just because, when you're breathing polluted air, especially, that stuff gets caught in the hairs in your nose. You want to kind of keep your nose clean, so to speak. And just some stuff for isolation from Stephen Porges, a video I put there about making contact through FaceTime and Skype rather than just texting and calling. You want to see people's faces. If you know you can't get close to them, you want to see people's faces. And I believe everybody should have an air filter in their house somewhere, some room that feels safe to them, that they know is clean. You can get an air monitor the air in that room. The big issue up here in the Northwest over the last few years has been smoke. And so you can't even open your windows. So when that happens, you can't cook in the house because smoke in the house creates a big process. And I think, let's see if there's any questions. The last thing, I have private sessions, promoting myself here. I'm going to do this again next Sunday. I'm a continuum teacher. Some of you may know continuum, some of you may not. I'll be sending out a flyer for that. That's a movement and breathing and sound modality, and we're going to do a continuum 2-hour class next Saturday on how to use movement, breath, and sound for health. And so I'll send a flyer out for that as well. And so I'm hooked up with a doctor orthopedic place in Seattle, and so we can do telehealth sessions that get covered by insurance if you need some help with your breathing. So that's it for me today. Let's see if we have any questions out there. Anything you want to talk about a little bit? We are at the 11:30 mark, but certainly happy to hear from everybody. It was 30 different chats here. Wow, that's pretty cool. I put up at the top, by the way, there's a video from Dr. Zach Bush, which I felt was pretty interesting. Anyway, any questions?
I have a question.
Sure, Karen.
I was just wondering how a deviated septum would affect the spiral of the breath coming in to the nose.
Well, it depends how bad the deviated septum. Depends how bad the deviated septum is. Number one, it doesn't really affect the spiral. Well, that's an interesting question. It's still going to spiral as long as it terminates there. But what is different about a deviated septum, because I have one, is that when I'm breathing through the nostril that's more open, I notice that more air flows more quickly. And when I'm breathing, when it switches over to the side that's closed more, to get the same amount of air, I have to slow my breath down quite a bit. Otherwise, if I feel inhibited by it and try to force it in there, it doesn't work. I just go, oh, I'm breathing through that nostril now. Things are moving a lot slower. But if it really inhibits your breathing over time, you have to get it fixed.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mhm.
And sometimes you can get those little nose dilators, like a little mute or nose event, things like that, to help you out a little bit, keep your nose, help the breathing. You should check them out sometimes. Do a little test. You can take a little Q-tip and just see if it helps either side to help breathe better. And a lot of times that'll help you with the breathing at night, especially stay open. It tends to get a little speeded up.
Thank you. Thank you.
I personally, just like you do still taping, I still tape. I want every little chance to make sure my mouth stays closed all night, though I know most of the time now stays closed. But I wear one in my nose all the time. It's imperative. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's easy. They're less expensive online than they are in the store. You know, money's an issue. Buy them online.
Can you say again what you're doing on Saturday?
I'm doing a movement class, a breathing and movement class on Saturday. So it'll be more experiential. We'll spend probably 45 minutes in an experiential of how breath and sound and movement can facilitate a more receptive system for breath.
Is it on your website?
It will be. I'm getting the flyer made right now. It will be.
For someone who's unfamiliar with continuum, such as myself, would that be appropriate? Do you already have to know some continuum?
My suggestion is for that, thank you for that question, Kathy. My suggestion is to go to the links that I'm putting on the flyer to learn a little bit about it, so you'll be a little prepared, so I don't have to explain it so as much. Yeah. So yeah, it'll be okay.
Is your class next Sunday? It's covering the same content as you did today?
Pretty much. I'll cover some of the same exercises. The context of the talk may change depending on what they discover this week.
Okay.
You know, I'm keeping up on the research and the scientific literature that's coming out. And so mostly what I've seen so far is reinforcing what I've been teaching, which has been very gratifying to me.
Yeah. Good.
So we'll see what happens this week.
Yeah.
The kidney piece is all new this week. So, yeah.
I have a question. I'm just, as my lungs are healing from being sick, I'm assuming if I practice what you're telling us to do, that will expedite the healing in my lungs, because my energy is slowly coming back. My chest is starting to feel better. So anything I can do to help that along.
Yeah. So what I say, and this is what happens when I was sick a long time ago, is like I'm looking for space. And so I'm appreciating whatever space I can find and not trying to push the space more open, but breathe into the space that I'm aware of.
Okay.
And think about, I'm looking for breath that feels pleasurable to me.
Okay. So it's not more work.
Huh?
So it's not more work that I feel like
No, not trying to make them do something, just like, how can I breathe in a way that feels like I can find some pleasure in my breathing? And really taking a hold of, yeah, I'm going to trust my breathing and just kind of invite it to be gentle and caring to my lungs. And let my lungs say, put them in charge and say, yeah, breathe in a way that feels good to you. It feels gentle to you. And so don't have an idea about the capacity of what's supposed to be happen, but at the level of pleasure. It's like, yeah, that feels good. I can rest into allowing that to happen.
Okay.
And that will be the way of getting treated by your own breathing.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So you're going to send us a link to the recording of this?
I will convert this over to recording. I'll post it on YouTube. Great. And I will send you the link to the YouTube, and I will also put it on my Google Drive. And in the Google Drive, you'll have not only the recording, but an audio of it, and also a copy of all the people's chats. So if there was stuff in there that I didn't see that was recommended, you can read the chat box as well. So.
I'm going to leave. Thank you. And thanks, everybody, and stay well. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Great. Goodbye.
I was going to mention something before you go there. There's a new tape that came out, only, like I know it's in the last year, but it's not something you can buy in the store, but you probably can buy on Amazon. It's by 3M. It's not as, it doesn't have that much the problems with too sticky and leaving residue. And it's made but it's called Transport. But it's it's not the clear one, it's the white one. And I was talking to a nurse and she says, yeah, they love it compared to the
Transport.
Yeah, Transport, but it's not the clear one. That's the big key.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate you. Help you get into the seminar. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I always pick up something new, and there's a big thing. It's that communication. Yeah, it's wonderful. Thank you.
Great. All right. Any other last minute words from anybody?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think so. Thank you.
You're welcome. And please come again. And
Yes.
listen, oh, and please, when you get the links, if anybody needs the information, just pass it along.
Wow, thank you.
Let it be distributed as widely as can.
Very generous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Sure, you're welcome.
Yes.
Be well.
Thank
Thank you, Robert.
Thank
All
you.
right. Bye-bye.
And the handout part, will be able to print that out too?
Yeah, it'll be attached to the email. It will also be in the Google Drive. It'll be in 2 places.
Okay,
You'll
great.
have a
Thank you
PDF
so
of the
much.
slides. For sure.
Very, very helpful.
All right, good.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye.